None of you asked, but I'm gonna yell at you about a bunch of homebrew rules I use in my D&D games. I made a video just like this about 2 years ago, and it is not up to date anymore. I don't use half the rules in that video anymore because we used them and they were poopy. But I'm gonna go over a bunch of rules that I said I used and then don't use anymore and why I don't and what I changed them to, and just generally give you an up-to-date down low on what I use for D&D homebrew rules. But yeah, all these rules I've used in my games a lot, like a lot, and my players like them, so maybe yours will too. And if they don't, then you can blame me. So, let's get started. But before we do, let's hear a word from our sponsor, Ghostfire Gaming, and their new adventure, Citadel of the Unseen Sun. Citadel of the Unseen Sun is the first ever Grim Hollow adventure using their new platform, Fables. Fables is a subscription service that gives you an episodic adventure each month. An all-in-one 5th edition adventure, each episode includes digital maps, tokens, and all the tools you need that are all in one place. There's a link down below. Inspiration tokens! I stole this rule from other TTRPGs, but modified it a bit. Originally, I wrote it for our Fallout TTRPG that we're running on Arcane Arcade, where they use bottle caps, but I decided to try to use it for D&D, and so far, I love it way more than Cardic Inspiration. Cardic Inspiration was getting a little stale and really overpowered since you could stack multiple cards on other people's rolls, and it also got really random when you can draw anything from an 8 to a plus 10 to a crit to a 4. Handing these out as rewards felt way too strong, and most of the time players would just save them for when they really needed them, and then there would be no tense situations whatsoever. This new coin system is different. Every game you start with a coin, and I actually got these cool, like, class tokens from Doi's Demos on Etsy, so you could also get these if you wanted to, give them to everybody who has a class. But I also have these gold coins that work well too. At the beginning of every game, you get a coin, and it starts upright. Anytime during the game, you can flip it to get advantage on a d20 roll, or you can use it as a re-roll, but if you re-roll, you have to take the new roll. It stays flipped for the rest of the game until you roll a natural 1, or I roll, as the DM, a crit against you. Then you can flip it back over. I, as the DM, can also flip your already flipped token to give you disadvantage on a roll, or to give me advantage on a roll against you. And so throughout the game, you're gonna slowly be flipping it over and over again, and you can also award it as like an inspiration token if like a character does something really cool, but you don't want to be like, you suddenly have a potion of healing. Instead, you can just flip their coin for an inspiration token. You want to be careful with this one too, because you don't want to be mean to your players by constantly giving them disadvantage on things they maybe want to succeed just to flip their coin. Or you also don't want to be doing it too much so that your players are begging for disadvantage on random rolls so that they can get their coin flipped. What I tend to do is flip it on a character who's succeeding a lot so that they get a little bit of like a low point, but then they get to have that point for later. Or on a character who isn't succeeding a lot, and I give them disadvantage on maybe like a meaningless roll so that they can have that inspiration coin for future use. You can also just do it in case of like super bad luck. So if characters are constantly failing all the time, you can just be like, you know what, flip your coin, you can have a little bit of success in the future, which in my experience has been working really, really well. Massive damage. Let's say you're just a little guy and Tiamat hits you with all of her breath weapons. You only have 100 health, she does 50 damage to you. That's more than half of your hit points. You have to succeed a Constitution saving throw of 15, or else you take System Shock. System Shock is a little table in the DM's guide that has a few things that can happen to you, from losing your reaction to becoming stunned to actually going unconscious as you reel from the sheer amount of pain that your body just endured. Let's say you're at 50 hit points, and out of your 100, you take 50 damage, and you hit 0. You still have to make a Constitution saving throw. However, instead of System Shock, because you hit 0, you take a Lingering Injury, which I use Xanathar's Lost Notes to everything else. This really awesome book, which you can get on DM's Guild, has an entire list of extended lingering injuries. It comes with a bunch of other injuries that are not as mean as the DMG ones, and also have some really interesting ones in here as well, like getting your teeth knocked out, or an item of yours breaks. You could even get a skull fracture, broken ribs, ringing ears. You can lose fingers, toes. It's awesome. But yeah, if you hit 0 and you fail that con save, you might lose a toe. Whenever you level up and roll your hit dice for health, you can re-roll ones. Unless it's a 1. Then you unfortunately get a 2. I no longer allow Xanathar's Guide level 1 racial feats. At first they were a good idea, they were pretty fun, but they ended up for some really powerful character builds, so we don't do it anymore. We just follow the normal ability score improvement, leveling, racial feat, and normal feat options. And if you're wondering, Jacob, that's not the Xanathar's Guide, that's the player's handbook. That's because my sister stole my Xanathar's Guide to everything, and I haven't got it back yet, Maddie! I only use this rule for one of my games, which is Evenfall, which you live stream on Arcane Arcade every other Friday, but it's called Crunchy Crits. I stole this from the Dungeon Dudes. I wanted to try it to see how it would work, and so far it's been pretty fun, but I don't think I'll use it again for another campaign, but if you want to hear my feedback on it, it's pretty fun. Basically, if you roll a d6 for your damage, you roll the d6 and then you add the maximum that dice has for your damage roll along with your modifier. So if your modifier was +3 and then you rolled a 3, you get 6, and then you get the maximum dice number, which is 6, which is 12. And this leads for some pretty explosive combat scenarios. More specifically, when certain characters get it, like a rogue, or maybe it's somebody with a really powerful magic item or a really powerful spell, it's almost instant kills for bad guys. But the bad guys can get it too, and it makes the combat really tense. But sometimes some characters get to be a little bit more overpowered than others, and if you don't want that, then don't use this rule. If you're ever below half your health, you are considered bloodied, and if you are below 10 HP, you're considered mortal. And there are certain abilities that I give people, and certain conditions that can happen to certain monsters when they are mortal and or bloodied. But it's also just a really good indicator on where monsters are in the battle and what their health is, without giving them the actual HP number. This isn't really a homebrew rule, this is just a magic item that I made that you could totally steal for your games if you want to. These are level-upable magic items. A better name for them is probably milestone magic items, or maybe achievement magic items. That's kind of what they are. Effectively, it's a magic item that a party member gets that has certain things they have to accomplish in order to unlock a new ability. For example, this one is for Kia, who is Spencer's character in our game Evenfall, and one of hers is cast Sending to the Queen 5 times. This is like an in-character thing that she's already doing, but it motivates her just a little bit more, and the reward she gets is she learns a terrible secret. Or another one, which is Subconscious. Attack a total of 4 surprised creatures. And if she does this, then she can cast Detect Thoughts 3 times per long rest. They're just cool ways for you to motivate your players and characters to do things, have goals to accomplish outside of the main plot, and then they get to get cool stuff in return, which of course is always decided by you. Magic item points. If you're a new character coming into the game and everybody's got magic items and you don't, I give that character points that they can spend to get magic items in the Dungeon Master's Guide. 1 point being for common, 2 points being for uncommon, 3 being for rare, 4 being very rare, and 5 being legendary. I tend to give about 3 to 5 depending on what level the party is, and it's an easy way for characters to get magic items really quickly, and you can just denote how many points they gotta spend in order to get items. So if they got 5 points, they gotta either get 1 legendary item, or maybe 2 uncommon items and a rare item. It's really up to you. Shared initiative. If you roll a 15 on your initiative, and another person rolls a 15 on their initiative, you guys go at the same time This can be kind of fun because the two players can organize their turns together and coordinate and plan and like team up during their turn and have their actions go in between one another and coordinate. And then sometimes they just go, you go first, I'll go after you, and you can do whatever you want, and nothing happens. But either way, it's the character's choice. If you ever roll the same initiative as a bad guy though, the bad guy always goes last after the players, no matter what their dexterity is. If you ever cast Grease, it isn't this big, it's this big. Also, it's flammable, much akin to Baldur's Gate 3. If you're in it, when fire damage touches it, you take 1d6 fire damage. I normally enforce variant encumbrance in my rules because I think it's a little bit more realistic, and I still like the rule, unless I'm running for newer players or everybody's got paper character sheets. I don't like you being able to hold a grand piano in your backpack, but I mean, the calculation for it is a little jarring, and I kinda wish it was times 8 instead of 5, but that's a dumb calculation. If you have a positive intelligence score, you can use your modifier as points to add extra proficiencies. So if you have a 15 intelligence giving you a +2 modifier, you can get insight proficiency or a new language. You can also use 3 of these points to get expertise in something, just to make intelligence a little bit better. Taking an hour to attune to something is silly in my opinion, and in my games, it only takes you an action to attune to a magic item. But to unattune from a magic item, it takes 1 minute. Flanking! You get a +2 to your attack rolls if you are on opposite sides of a dude, which means you have to be like here, or here, or here. You can't be like this, you can't be like this, and you can't be like that. However, you do not get a flanking bonus if a creature has a passive perception above 18. Basically, they can see all around them, they have really good senses, and being flanked doesn't really hinder them all that much. That also applies to any creatures with blind sight, or any creatures that can realistically see in more places than one. So, you can't flank a beholder. Death saving throws. They're just like any other saving throw. You can add bardic inspiration to them. Paladin aura effects can affect them. You can even use your inspiration token on them. But they're always secret. Nobody's allowed to look except for the dungeon master. Oh, and the person who rolled it. And at the end of the day, Rule of Cool is the most used homebrew rule in any of my games. If you want to do something and it's not in the rules, I will do my best in order to let you try to do it, unless it breaks the rules just a little too much. I want my players to have fun, and if they want to do something that's outside the norm, well, gosh diddly darn it, I'm gonna let them. Most of the time, when there's something that somebody wants to do that completely breaks the rules, I normally have them give up something. And I really owe it to my good friend Jack for really stressing me as a DM on this Rule of Cool, which I'm now going to aptly name Something Lost, Something Gained. In our last game of Evenfall, Spencer's character Kia was dying, and there was a Mind Flayer tadpole infecting her, and Jack's character Laszlo had pretty much no way to save her, and looked at me and said,
how many paladin levels do I have to give up?
Give up? Paladin levels?
I am using all of my divine keeper bestowed power to rip this parasite out of her head, destroy it entirely, even if it means giving up a part of myself.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Is there another way?
Nope.
I'll do it.
So, yeah, we ran with it. And I made sure that he knew that he was going to sacrifice something pretty crazy. What ended up happening is I cut all of his levels in half, and he was okay with that so long as Kia lived. This is by far one of the main reasons why I love Dungeons & Dragons, and I plan to implement more of it into my future games. If you ever want to do something crazy, but you're willing to sacrifice something huge for it, I'm gonna let you do it. Anyways, that was the homebrew video. That's all the homebrew. It's most of the homebrew. So there's a lot of little tiny homebrew things that I do that I didn't feel like were worth mentioning. And if you're like, hey Jacob, in your other video, you use this rule, and then you don't bring it up in this video. It's because I don't use it because I ended up not liking it, and there's not much more to it than that. Why don't you tell me some homebrew rules you guys like in the comments, because I would love to read through them and then commit theft as I steal all your ideas. Dungeons and Dragons! We are thieves, but it's fun, so it's okay. It's not. Don't steal work that people have put their time and effort into. Make sure to credit people. Don't. I'm not endorsing thievery. Okay, the video's done.